Hi family, have you subscribed to my channel? If not, what are you waiting for? Family, I want everybody who comes across this video to listen and drop your opinion, what you think about what you will hear. We think in Africa, we are poor. Let's listen what they think about Africa behind the scenes or behind their doors. How they talk about Africa, the importance of Africa overseas. Let's listen.
Is incredibly self-defeating, is my view. I just don't understand why we are taking a bunch of tools in our foreign policy toolbox and tossing them into a dumpster.
And I think we need to start giving African countries more of what they want and less of what they don't. That seems like an obvious proposition, but frequently our Africa strategy doesn't seem to be guided by that principle.
Picking a fight with South Africa, a pretty important nation, and labeling them as committing genocide against African farmers, accepting Afrikaner refugees while we're shutting off other refugees from Africa.
We are in a state of crisis right now when it comes to our relations with the continent and other competitors of ours, from Iranians to Russians to Chinese to people that don't always align with us, from the Emiratis and others, are flooding the zone where we are retreating in a stunning way.
They called us partners, then they pulled the plug and left us hanging. Now, Washington is panicking because China didn't hesitate to step in. This is the real reason Africa is being fought over like a prize, and what you're about to hear wasn't meant for your ears. For decades, America ran programs across Africa that supported education, health, and entrepreneurship. But under the Trump administration, those were quietly cut. No warnings, no consultations. Programs like PEPFAR, MCC, and YALI gone. Now, U.S. senators are panicking because China is filling the void fast. In this clip, U.S. lawmakers admit the damage, and they're terrified of what happens next.
Mr. Missouri, thank you for your testimony. What I hear from both of you is more engagement, not less. More of what we have done that works, and that the abrupt and chaotic closure of a very wide range of our most effective tools for engaging with Africa, from the MCC to YALI to the PEPFAR program, puts all of this at risk. Mr. Chairman, if I might, given your opening comments in the exchange, I'd love to work with you on clarifying the U.S.-Kenya relationship. Their foreign minister and national security advisor were just here last week meeting with the president and folks at the White House, and I agree with you that some of those statements with the PRC are very concerning given the deep and long relationship and the security relationship we have with regards to Al-Shabaab in Somalia.
It's disappointing to say the least.
You referenced how important it is that there be more students from Africa coming to the United States. Well, I've got a solution for you. It's a 15-year-old program called the Young African Leaders Initiative that has sent 20,000 vetted, promising African students to the United States. The University of Delaware happens to be one of the 20 hosting universities at a very modest cost that is about to be shut down. Not a good idea. It brings promising young African leaders to the United States for a summer to meet with businesses and entrepreneurs, to meet with civil society, to convene in Washington, and then go to 20 different states all over the country. One of many things I don't think we should shut down. To the point you just made, Ambassador Gavin, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, MCC, launched under President Bush, explicitly used corruption and combating corruption, reducing corruption as one of the key indicators for whether or not a country would get a long-term development partnership with the United States. It is all but closed. Most of its staff have been laid off. Many of its compacts have been shut down. PEPFAR, Mr. Missouri, is all but closed. It has been trimmed dramatically from its scope. A 25-year-old program, long deserving of bipartisan support. I'd just be interested in both of you briefly saying, what does it do to our reputation on a continent of 54 countries, a continent with enormous human potential and natural resources, a country that China and Russia see as the continent of the 21st century? What's it do to our place in East Africa and across the continent if we abruptly shut down these long-standing demonstrated and effective programs? Madam Ambassador, and then Mr. Meservey.
Thank you, Senator. It is incredibly self-defeating, is my view. I just don't understand why we are taking a bunch of tools in our foreign policy toolbox and tossing them into a dumpster.
I think the term was a wood chipper.
Okay, I suppose so.
It's tougher to reassemble things that have been put through a wood chipper than things that have gone through a reasoned, considerable review, which
Oh,
is the
sure.
process
No,
that we
reforms
should have
make-
gone through, is
Yeah.
to have this body, Congress, work with the new administration to say, okay, trim this, reform this, change this, shutter this, expand this.
Yeah.
That's not what happened.
No, it's not. And not only have we lit our credibility on fire, and you see particularly China making hay of this, the favorite phrase now is reliable partner. China's a reliable partner. They're not going to abruptly pull the rug out from under you. And I think that, some of the kind of knock-on effects, consider the tens of thousands of health workers in Kenya who are out of work now. These are educated, engaged citizens, and the messaging we want to do about this long relationship with Kenya, it's at odds with their lived experience now. And
I'm about out of time. I've got less than a minute.
Sorry.
Mr. Meservey, if I might. I do agree that a bright spot is the hard work done under the previous administration by Avril Haines in DRC, Rwanda, and it's continuing under Special Advisor Boulos. There's a real chance of peace there. I can't think of a more concentrated example of the PRC-U.S. competition than the two adjacent bases in Djibouti. I've just introduced with Senator Ricketts a bill to try and prioritize focusing on denying the PRC more basing opportunities on the continent. What do you think we ought to make a priority in doing that important work?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, and I'm very pleased to hear about the bill and your attention to this problem. I would especially highlight the danger of an Atlantic Ocean base. We know quite reliably that China has been pursuing such a base for years. It's not hard to see how problematic that would be for.
Each of the newsletters have their own kind of homepage, their own kind of marketing landing page.
Yes, they have their own homepage, their own web presence.
Security of the American homeland. So I think I mentioned in my original remarks that commercial engagement should be at the heart of a strategy. And I think we need to start giving African countries more of what they want and less of what they don't. That seems like an obvious proposition, but frequently our Africa strategy doesn't seem to be guided by that principle. So the existential crisis that every African government faces is youth unemployment. And our development assistance and humanitarian assistance, as useful as that is in some contexts, is not going to address those problems. So I think
I do think that the Development Finance Corporation and the MCC really focused on private sector partnerships that fuel growth from the bottom up. I think to the extent we can focus our messaging, our investments, and our partnerships on combating corruption, on being a secure and reliable partner, and on helping create reliable, high-growth jobs, this continent of 4 billion people by the end of this century is a place where we can win in the competition with China. And if we don't, if we continue our retreat, we won't.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for your helpful testimony. I want to return to the chairman's opening comments where he introduced an article into the record and talked about the recent discussion of the Kenyan president in China about this new world order. Let me read from an article that I'd like introduced in the record. Kenya calls for a new world order that reflects global South realities, and this is from KBC Digital, the Kenya Broadcasting Company, if I could introduce it into the record. From April 23, just recently. Speaking during a public lecture at Peking University in Beijing, President William Ruto emphasized the need to fashion a new world order which takes cognizance of present realities. The president was in China for a state visit. Okay, China is welcoming the Kenyan president for a state visit. Said this: the ongoing trade tariff wars could signal the end of the old world order as it has existed since the end of World War II. And further, regarding the relationship between Kenya, China, and the rest of the world, Ruto remarked that Kenya and China are not just trade partners, but, quote, co-architects of a new world order. So his comments are putting the U.S. in the old world order that has not helped the global south. This is what he is asserting, whether or not it's true, how true it is. He's suggesting that the trade wars might be the destruction of the old world order and the creation of a new world order where China and Kenya and other nations focus more attention on the global south. How do we get to a place where the president of Kenya, where we've had this long relationship just 2 weeks ago, is making those assertions in the middle of a state visit to China? I do think comments that have been made by my colleagues, the recent apparent abandonment of PEPFAR, the defunding of USAID, NED, the DFC, the MCC, the YALI program, which also has a presence at the University of Virginia. AFRICOM is not based in Africa and has perennially been under-resourced. It's based in Germany. Picking a fight with South Africa, a pretty important nation, and labeling them as committing genocide against Afrikaan farmers, accepting Afrikaner refugees while we're shutting off other refugees from Africa. Mr. V, you used to work with Church World Service. Church World Service work on refugee issues has been dramatically curtailed. The church I go to is heavily Congolese refugees who have been resettled in Richmond by Catholic Refugee Service. Their work has been curtailed. You know, we don't get the benefit of the doubt necessarily, and people look at evidence and they interpret it as to what it means. And what they're interpreting, the evidence that I've cited and other bits of evidence, is that the U.S. is, you know, to put it charitably, uninterested, and to put it not so charitably, affirmatively disinterested. And that leads a president like President Ruto to make those kinds of comments, almost gleefully hoping that Donald Trump's tariff war will destroy the world order that the U.S. created in the aftermath of World War II, to the benefit not only of the United States, but other nations all over the world. We've got to reverse this. We have to reverse it. And I hear this all over Latin America as I travel there. We'd rather deal with you than with China. I think in the Americas, there's even a closer cultural connection because of migration patterns and family ties, but there are with Africa as well. We'd rather deal with you than China, but you got to have something on the table. And China does, and they're not going anywhere. And yeah, the conditions may be bad, and yeah, there are strings attached, and yeah, they may not perform, but they got something on the table. What do you have on the table? The things we've had on the table are being hollowed out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to start by adding to, I think, some of the sentiments expressed that we have a colossal problem right now by our failing to understand that if you look at all of humanity, the future is in so many ways Africa. We have 1 out of every 4 people on the planet Earth, and by 2050 are going to be on the continent. 1 out of every 3 working age people. The continent is indispensable when it comes to the future strength, opportunities, prosperity, health of Americans. It is stunning to me that we are lacking a vision for engagement with the continent and are making such colossal mistakes. What the Trump administration is doing right now is not only unacceptable, but it is a series of self-inflicted wounds when we cut the kind of programs that have created economic stability and opportunity for American companies, that have gutted public health and our response to public health, because a public health crisis anywhere now is a threat to public health everywhere. We are stopping, especially as we see the Tanzania elections and the Uganda elections and the instabilities there, we're cutting back our resources, helping with democratic stability at a time that democracies are under retreat all across the globe, and the democratic freedoms and ideals that we preach are being undermined by forces that don't share our values. We are in a state of crisis right now when it comes to our relations with the continent and other competitors of ours, from Iranians to Russians to Chinese to people that don't always align with us, from the Emiratis and others, are flooding the zone where we are retreating in a stunning way. We are seeing our retreat on public health, on economic empowerment, on national security, and creating a more volatile and dangerous environment where there are forces there that want to see the destruction of America. And there's no place that, to me, that this is more obvious than just this retreat we have, even in where our embassies and consulates that this administration is slating to close. China has embassies in every single country, and we now see a list that consulates and embassies all over the world, but 6 embassies and 2 consulates in Africa, including around the Horn, are being shut down. When I travel through Africa, the power of our presence there, our ability to combat misinformation and propaganda, our ability to create deep partnerships and connection, we are truly pursuing a set of policies that are going to undermine America's safety, security, and economic strength in the future and make us be more targeted by forces from the Red Sea all the way to terrorist attacks here at home, based upon the instability and folks who are focusing and targeting and trying to undermine America. And so, I am stunned. I've already been upset in past administrations with our failure to prioritize. But what's happening right now is just utterly stunning, and generations of Americans will pay a price for it unless we find a way, in a bipartisan way, to focus and do more.
Let's break it down. While China is building ports, offering loans, and locking in influence, America cut and ran. They ended the very programs that trained Africa's young leaders, supported hospitals, fought corruption, and now they're scared. Why? Because the U.S. thought Africa would just wait, but Africa moved on, and China stepped in. Now they're worried about Chinese military bases on the Atlantic coast. They're scared of losing the great game, not because they care about Africans, but because they're losing control.
Family, I am back again. I just want to bring up this video here. I just came across it, and at some point, we can think that we are poor in Africa without realizing how much we are rich in Africa. Behind the scenes, what is being said about Africa, it really surprised me. People, they realize the importance of South Africa, to be in partner with Africa and start changing the attitude against Africa by the West. I was surprised when I came through this video, and I still don't believe that behind the doors, they really know that Africa is very important and it's key to their politics, to their economy, and to a lot of things, because without Africa, overseas is nothing. Because Africa has got all what you could think in the world. We've got minerals, we've got labor, we've got, we've got land, virgin land. It's just that we have no good leaders. Leaders are being used overseas, they are being puppets. But what is being said behind the scenes, it left my mouth like, wow. We always cross the rivers going overseas thinking that everything, but they see Africa as more important than what we see overseas. Family, what do you think about this after listening and hearing what they were talking about? Please drop your comment, like and share. Ngiyathanda nokho ngothando kalapha. Ngithi bantu bakithi noma ngabe izindlu zodaka kusekhaya la. Bravo.